All right, guys, welcome back to Project 4 Mill. Today is an exciting day. We're going to be putting on this lock-up clutch cover and the entire clutch side of our assembly. So I'm going to save the bullshit today, and we're going to hop right on into it. Alright guys, so we're over here at this beautiful clutch side of the motor, and for you guys that haven't been following, these are not brand new cases. These are vapor blasted cases. These are my original cases from 1990. If you want to get your cases vapor blasted, no matter what kind of bike it is, you can head on over to DBC Racing and they'll give you a quote on whatever kind of cases you have. Now anyways, back to the build. We're going to start off really easy and put on a couple simple plates. There's a couple things missing here that you might not notice, that you might see on your motor. First and foremost is going to be this plate right here. Now I actually removed this plate the first time around when I did this build because I read a bunch of stuff on forums saying that this plate is nonsense and it's unnecessary and to just toss it. So thank God I kept it, because after doing a little bit of research, this is actually a directional plate and it goes right here, and its purpose is it kind of acts like, it's almost like a shovel, or a funnel rather. And it's supposed to help channel oil into these two ports here to get into our transmission. So without this plate, you're not going to get as much oil in here. You know, chances are you'd be okay without running it. You know, my transmission seemed to be all right, but that was also only after about 10 hours of use. So why not keep this plate on there? So I'm going to go ahead and put this plate on, and I'm also going to put this bearing stopper plate on, which goes right here. And that's just going to retain this bearing on our transmission. Now these both get tightened down to 7.2 foot-pounds of torque according to the manual. I'm just going to screw them down because they've got Phillips heads. They're not you know, a nut or anything. So I'm just going to snug them up, and they also recommend to use a little bit of blue Loctite. Alright, so step one is complete. You can see how that would channel oil into the transmission. So let's keep moving with our shift arm detent. Okay guys, so we're going to be putting on our shift arm detent right here. This is an aftermarket one from Mac Daddy Racing. You can see it has a bearing on the end of it. Now here's our factory one. Pretty much the same thing, only the factory one has a piece of just regular steel in here that spins. The bearing's going to be a lot smoother. Now, I had a couple of you guys send me DMs and making comments telling me not to run this thing. Now, apparently, Yamaha in, I think, the mid to early 2000s, their YZ125s came from the factory with a roller bearing on their detent arms. It was a very similar setup. And they were recalled because the bearings were breaking apart and getting stuck in their cases and causing problems. So people were stressing me not to run this thing. Well, I went ahead and called Mac Daddy Racing, and I spoke with Jesse because they've been selling these things. You know, Mac Daddy Racing is a reputable brand, and you know, Fast Racing sells these things. There's a couple other companies too, and I've never heard of any issues with these things. So I just wanted to go the extra step, and I talked to Jesse. He said they've never had any issues with these things. So that must have been some kind of weird thing. You know, maybe they were junk. The type of bearings they were using in the YZ125s were faulty or something, but you don't have to worry about running one of these bearings in your Banshee. So we're going to go ahead and install this thing. First things first, we'll put our spring in. Hopefully you guys can see. I kind of have the camera set up. You know, my hands get in the way here. Put our spring in. There's a little catch that the end of the spring goes on, and I like to leave it sit a little further out because the catch is ramped. I know you guys can't, it's a little bit difficult to see, but when I push in on this thing, you'll see this spring will twist as it goes down the ramp and goes into place. But if you leave it out like this, you can get your detent arm on and hook it on the spring. And then as you tighten your bolt down, it's going to pull it down the spring down that ramp and pop it right into place. Same thing here, just a drop of blue Loctite. And now just pull this in nice and slow. If you feel like getting hitched up on anything, stop. You don't want to break anything. but you can usually get it to slip right into place. There's also a shelf on this bolt. You want to make sure that's not getting hitched up. The flared edge on this this bolt should be right up against your shift arm detent. If there's a gap, that means that the shoulder is not in the hole of the shift arm detent. But that's all good. I'm just going to snug this up. If you want to go to spec, the manual calls for 7.2 foot-pounds. I really couldn't help myself. After all, I am the torque Nazi. All right, so our shift cam is rolling nice and smooth now. It's not usually easy to do by hand, and it's not really easy, but it was almost impossible to do with my fingers before, and now this thing's rolling pretty nice and smooth. So that roller bearing definitely helps out on your shift detent. Now, something else I did was the shift star mod, where I take the points down on our shift star. If you guys haven't seen that, I have a video showing exactly how to do that modification. Definitely check that out. So the next thing we're going to be installing is our shift changer. Now this goes through the motor right here and comes out the other side, and this is where your shifter hooks up. Now we're actually going to be doing a small modification to this, and I'm going to show you exactly what we're doing. It's a very basic modification. We're basically going to be widening up this window just a little bit, so that this screw right here actually adjusts your shift changer, and it's kind of like a cam, like an egg shape. And every time you shift, this bumps up and down, and this little cam here comes through here, and basically your range of motion is governed by the width of this opening. So we're just going to open that up a little bit more, and that's going to allow us to push the shift changer just a little bit further, which can help with shifting. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this in and push it in place and just show you how it works. So if we weren't doing any modifications, that would be it. It's installed. Now you want to remember to have the little white shift collar on the back and your spring. Now you'll see how this works here, and it's not the easiest thing to press, so just bear with me here. But basically you see these two hooks are on our shift star, and if you pull up, it moves our shift star. Now you can see this is stopping the motion. That's as high as you could shift up. It's the same when you go down. So that's what we're going to broaden up just a little bit, so that throw is a little bit longer. Alright guys, I just got done modding my shift shaft or shift changer, whichever you want to call it. You can see I opened up this gap right here. That's going to allow us for a longer throw, making shifting a little bit easier. I also polished this shaft just to make it as smooth as possible. Now before I go sliding this in, I'm going to loosen up this lock nut on our eccentric screw or our adjusting screw, whatever you want to call it. Now like I said, this is kind of egg shaped. It's like a cam, and that's going to help adjust where our shift hooks, our little grabbers, lay. Now this shift fork or shift shaft and eccentric screw are pretty well worn. There's a lot of components on this that are pretty well worn. You have to remember this Banshee is a 1990, and I think these are the original parts. So I'm hoping that I can get away with this and we can adjust it nice and evenly. I was able to do it the first time I built this motor, so let's see where it lies. You know, at worst I can always take this back apart and put a new eccentric screw in here, and possibly even a new shift spring, because even the spring is worn. I mean, this motor probably has a good amount of hours on it. So let's see how it fits, and we'll test it out and see how it runs the way it is. So I'm going to break loose this nut so that we can adjust. We'll start our shifter in there, and then I'm going to take a little bit of my trans fluid and just run a small amount down the shaft and distribute it evenly. Alright, so we got it in place. Alright guys, now I have this set up to kind of show you the best that I can, but it's a little bit of a difficult angle. So if you see these grabbers on the top and bottom, those hook on to the pegs on our shift star and shift the transmission. Now what we need to adjust is the gap between the top claw and the bottom claw. And you can see right now there's a big gap in the bottom. We can actually stick this poker in here, and the top it's touching. so it's not lined up. So what we do is spin the eccentric screw, and you'll see right away, you see it moving? It adjusts that gap. Now, right about there, we have an even gap on the top and bottom. I'll move it around and see if it comes back to where we have it. Looks good. Looks good to me. Okay guys, so I apologize. I forgot to press the record button. I bent this tab down so that this washer is now locked, so this locking nut won't back off. Now, one other thing that I did want to point out is that, I don't know if you guys can see, but there's little divots because this eccentric screw is worn out. But if you have a worn out section, this screw can actually be adjusted in and out, and you can move it down just a little bit and move to a section that's not worn. So that's what I had to do to make mine work, and it seems to be working pretty well. So I'm going to put this back in. Still lines up nice and even, and we're ready to move on. Now we'll put our kick idler gear on. Really easy to do. We've got a small flat washer. Slides on. Then our actual idler gear. Now I've already put a little bit of lube on the shaft there. You don't want to do it dry. And then we have a washer that's got a D shape. Can only go on one way. And then a clip goes on. Alright, so now we're going to put on our kickstart axle. You want to make sure that this tab right here goes in this little cutout in your case. And then we'll take our spring and wrap it around and put it on this peg up here right in the groove so that it won't fall out. And then if you want, you can take a vice grip and hold in this white collar and spin it, make sure that it functions properly. You could actually use your kicker. I just don't have mine ready, so I'm going to use this vice grip very, very gently. You don't want to mess up your splines. And then we'll hold the white spacer so the gear doesn't come off. We'll just make sure it works. Alright, now I'm going to be putting my clutch pack on. I'm not doing it the traditional way, so I'm not going to be walking you guys through how to do this. If you do want to see how to put it together, you can check out my other video where I show a step-by-step process of putting a clutch in. For this method, though, I'm just going to kind of slide it on there and wiggle it around and twist the clutch boss until everything lines up. If you are doing it this way, it definitely helps to be in neutral. Now we're going to slide in our clutch rod and ball. Put a little bit of assembly lube on them first. Now right here I'm putting in my pancake bearing, which I didn't really explain. If you guys are looking for a detailed video on that, you can check out South Texas Banshee. Now I'm going to take our pressure plate. You want to make sure this sits flush. You can see right here it's not sitting flush up against the plate. Just have to take this and roll it. And there we go. Then we'll take our nut and spin it on. Alright guys, here's where things are going to start to get a little bit crazy. I'm going to put on this lockup setup. Now I've never actually put one of these on before, but it shouldn't be too difficult. We have our heavy duty springs we're putting on here. Now I actually didn't want to use heavy duty springs because it's not really necessary with the lockup as well, especially with the build that I'm doing. But I don't have a new set of OEM springs, and I don't want to use old springs, so I'm going to stick with the HD springs for right now. And we have the quick change clutch cover, so it's not going to be a problem if I want to change it out. So how I'm going to put this on is literally right over top of the springs, and I'm going to use these bolts that came with the kit to kind of pull it in. I want to be careful here. I don't want to pull out any threads. Alright, so I'm about to start pulling these in. You want to make sure that none of these lockout mechanisms are stuck in the back, because you'll crunch them down and you could break them. The impact driver was freaking me out a little bit, so I'm going to use this wrench. Now the instructions that came with this lockout say to tighten down the top and bottom bolt. Oh, we gotta be careful. This is what I'm talking about right here. One of the fingers is behind. Can't have that. So if they get locked behind there, you probably break this thing. But yeah, so in the instructions, they tell you to do the top and the bottom, just 2 bolts, and then tighten in the other 4, so you're not fumbling around with all 6 bolts. And with the impact gun, it was a little scary, but now that I'm using this wrench, I feel okay, because you got to remember, you have the pressure of all 6 springs resting on these 2 bolts. And it just scares me because the clutch boss that this bolts into can be pretty fragile. But this seems to be working just fine. Okay. And now we'll torque these down to 7.2 foot-pounds. I'm actually going to go to 8 because my torque wrench does not have an in-between. Alright, so that's on now. That was kind of nerve-wracking putting it on. Like I said, when you're putting all the tension of all those springs just on 2 bolts, it's kind of scary, especially with a fragile part like this. I was a little scared I was going to strip out the aluminum or something was going to snap. But I'd say the most difficult part was monitoring these arms and making sure that one of them doesn't get stuck in the back. But really, it's not that hard to do. I can tell this is going to have an extremely hard clutch pull. But, you know, it was difficult before with those HD springs. But like I said, we're going to have that quick change cover. So it's going to be no problem if I want to switch it out. So we're going to run it this way for now. All right, all that's left to do is to adjust our clutch free play with this little screw right here. I'm not going to go through how to do that. I'm just going to take care of it, and then we'll put our clutch cover on. Alright guys, I'm about to throw on my clutch cover. I'm going to throw a little bit of gasket sealer on the outside portion of our gasket. I like to just put it on one side. I usually don't have any leaks at all. And what I'm doing here is making sure our O-ring didn't get pinched. And of course, you know, I'm torquing this thing down to 8 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to take a razor and cut some of this excess gasket material off. Everything was going really smooth with this build, but we just ran into a problem. But what would a build be without problems, right? So it's not a big deal at all. I was putting on this water pump cover, as you guys could see, and if you look in this hole here, you can see the hole does not line up. No matter how far down I go, it's just not lining up. The front one, you could probably make work, and the bottom one lines up nice. But that top one, there's just no way I'm getting that in there. And I can see what the problem is. If I pull this off, you can see there's a little lump here on the case. And that's just pushing up against the inside of our water pump cover, and it's preventing the case from, let me get this on here. It needs to sit like right, if you go above, beyond that little lump, like right there. But as soon as you push it on, it pushes it up a little bit. But that's no problem. We'll get a Dremel, we'll bore that out a little bit, and we'll make it right. Might as well use that same Dremel we were using earlier, and we'll just shave out this little portion right here. And I'll just take off a little by little until we get it to fit. Alright, you can see that little area that I shaved out right here. So let's try this again. Alright guys, so we got the clutch side all done on this 4mm motor. Everything went together pretty easily. The mods came out really nice. It really wasn't that difficult to do. The only thing that got a little scary was putting together that lockout mechanism, just because I've never done one before. But we got the job done, and it really wasn't that bad. The only other difficulty we really had was getting on this water pump cover. Can't really bash the company for that. If you get an aftermarket part that fits with no problems at all, it's pretty rare. A lot of times you have to tweak aftermarket stuff to make it fit just right. They never fit just right. That's just kind of the world of aftermarket parts. So everything ended up finishing very well. It was easy enough to take care of that. No problems at all. Well, I'm on a roll here, and I'm a little bit too excited to stop here. So we might as well put our stator on and get the stator cover on and finish this motor up entirely. It's really easy to do the stator side of the motor. It's way easier than the clutch side. Let's wrap this up. Alright, so we're over here on the stator side of the motor. Let's throw this thing together real quick. First thing we're going to do is take our stator, fish our wires through one by one so that they can fit through the hole. You want to be careful with this grommet not to rip it, but it usually fits in no problem. Now we have our 3 bolts here. We're going to put a little bit of Loctite on them. Now my stator plate is modified, and I do have a video showing how to modify your OEM plate if you want to adjust your timing to +4. And I'm not sure if you can see, but there's little hash marks on my timing plate. And basically, where those hash marks are lined up with this portion of the case right here is your degree of timing. So I'm going to twist mine to 4 degrees and snug up my screws. And then I'll torque these to 8 foot-pounds. Now I'm throwing my Kickstarter on real quick so that I can roll the motor over and get the key journal at the top. There we go. Now I'm going to slide my key in. And put my flywheel on. I'm going to throw a little bit of Loctite on here. Spin our bolt on. And I'm going to use the impact. And that should be plenty torqued. Now we're going to check our pickup gap right in between our pickup right there and one of our magnets. It looks like mine's in spec. You want to be between 18 thousandths and 20 thousandths. If you are out of spec, you just simply loosen these two screws and move your pickup until you're at the right width. All right, a couple last things here. We'll put on our shift cam cover. This has an O-ring on the back. Make sure you put a little bit of Vaseline around that or whatever kind of lubricant you like to use. And I'm just going to pop it in there. We're not going to put the bolts in because our DRW case saver goes in front of that and it's going to utilize these 3 bolt holes. Then we have our drive shaft collar. Also, put lubricant inside this seal before pressing this in. Just press that in like so. Now I'll put our brand new primary drive gear on. This is a 15 tooth DBC Racing hooked me up with. Then we have our old ratty lock washer that's going to last us just one more time. And our nut. Now I'm not going to tighten that down until we have the chain on. And last but not least, I'm going to throw this custom stator cover on. Already have the rubber gasket pressed on the back. Then these get torqued down to 5.1 foot-pounds of torque, according to the manual. I'm going to go to 6 foot-pounds. And I keep forgetting to put these weep hole bolts in. Alright guys, the motor is done. I'm really glad we went the extra mile today and completed this thing, and the motor looks absolutely beautiful. Now I am going to have to take our stator cover back off. Our case saver does not go, fit over top. It has to be put underneath. The shift lever actually goes through. And the reason that I didn't put it on there is because I don't think I can get our chain on because of how intricate this thing is. I think we have to put the chain on first and then put our case saver on. So I decided to just leave that off for now, but I wanted to throw everything together so that we could get an idea of what this motor looks like all together because it looks really awesome. So all in all, I'm really happy with this build. Granted, we're not completely done just yet. We have to do some tuning and everything once the motor is in the frame, but that's going to be the fun part. All the hard work is done. There are a couple things I would do differently if I could do it over again. You know, I learned a lot of stuff on this build. One of the first things that I would have definitely done is the Pro Mod transmission. If you guys aren't familiar with that, I believe what they do is they remove every other dog on certain gears in the transmission, and they also put a bearing on the end of your shift cam. It's supposed to make it shift a lot better, especially if you have a lockout clutch or lock-up clutch, whatever you want to call it. It's supposed to make shifting a lot easier. Now, hopefully, we'll still be able to shift all right, even with the lockup. That's another thing that, you know, I learned in this build. I didn't know what a lockup was, or, you know, well, I knew what it was. I didn't really know how it worked. But there are supporting mods that go with that, especially if it's going to be a trail-ridden quad. It wasn't 100% necessary for this build. This quad will probably be putting out, I'm hoping, around 85 horsepower, and the heavy-duty clutch might have been able to hold that. Regardless, it doesn't matter. I still would have bought this same clutch cover because, for one, it looks amazing, and also it adds the ease of access to our clutch if we ever need to change it out. I can take that lockout clutch off and still have this trick look, and it'll be easy with this cover. So even if the lockout makes it difficult to shift, it's not going to be a problem. I can take it off and we'll run the heavy-duty clutch, and, you know, we'll get to see what happens. And I can run it several different ways. The next time I pull this motor apart, though, we'll do the Pro Mod transmission. I'm really excited to see how this thing shifts with the modded shift star, the modded shift shaft, and the roller detent bearing arm. So it should have an improvement in the shifting. Maybe that'll overcome the lockup clutch. Who knows? So, you know, some of the stuff I read online, guys were saying it was okay even without the Pro Mod. And then guys were saying you can't shift. You got to wait until you come back way off the RPMs or the clutch doesn't disengage. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, I'm really happy with the way that this motor turned out. And it's just a beautiful motor. So what I'm going to do is I want to throw the pipes on and the carbs and everything and give you guys a really cool picture and we'll do a couple cinematics showing you what this motor looks like before we throw it in the frame. So coming up next, we're going to be pulling up the Banshee frame, getting that thing ready, and then we're going to be throwing the motor in and firing this baby up. Now before I go ahead and mounting up these parts, I want to take a moment to thank everybody that's made this build possible. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for watching these videos, giving me the following and support that I have, because without you guys, I wouldn't even be doing this stuff. And really, I appreciate everybody watching and the comments you guys put down there, the likes. You guys make my day every single time, and it makes me push forward and keep making videos like this. I want to give a big thank you to DRW Performance for sending me that tricked out case saver. SLP hooked me up with the exhaust. Driveline Performance did a lot, gave me a lot of help with the 421 Assassin kit. They helped me out with jetting, which we're going to be getting to, and other parts of the build, suggesting parts and stuff like that. Got our clutch cover and lockup set up from Fast Racing. They also gave me some other tricked out stuff. And I want to give an extra special thank you to DBC Racing and BP Racing. Blake from DBC Racing was actually my first sponsor, and he really helped me out with the vapor blasting of the cases and actually persuaded me to go that route. I wasn't even going to do that originally, and he's helped me out with powder coating some parts. He sent some the sprockets my way, a couple other things, and he's just been a huge help as far as, you know, doing the build in itself and going back and forth with him over the phone with suggestions and things like that. And I want to thank Steve from BP Racing. Steve actually goes back and forth with me on the phone. We've actually had conversations and everything where we talk about ideas for videos and whatnot. And he's hooked me up with some really good stuff. He also, you know, those guys know a lot about Banshees too. So if ever I have questions or anything, you know, I'm not the all-knowing mechanic. Most of the time before I do any of my videos, I do my research and I'm learning things myself, and all these guys really help me out a lot. So again, thank you all for making this build possible. Enough with the soft stuff. Let's get to mocking these parts up on this motor and see what it looks like. Okay guys, so that's going to be it for this one. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate everything that all of you have done. Appreciate all my sponsors. And remember to check me out on Instagram. It's MichaelSabo350. For those of you that follow my Facebook page, I am taking the page down this Saturday. Anyways, guys, enjoy the rest of the week, and I will see you in the next video where we'll be putting this motor in the Banshee frame.